You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Ready, Bob? Hello, patrons, and welcome to this new episode of Addressing Gettysburg. This is, I think, a first in that the topic is chosen, sent in, if you will, by one of you. And Balthazar is the person who sent this one in. We're going to talk about what it was like when the armies were occupying Gettysburg on June 26th when the Confederates came through, and June 30th and July 1st through 3rd with Union and Confederate armies. Sitting here with me, as always, is co-host extraordinaire Robert Steenstra. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Matt. It's going to be a little noisy today.
It is, because we are at the Farnsworth House in the beer garden, and this is the first time you're going to hear road noise, but it's also...
Yes.
Louder road noise than normal, but also mixed with the birds that are here in the beer garden.
Yeah.
And hopefully nobody will get pooped on.
There's a good reason for that, though. I just heard a motorcycle go by, and years ago, Chris Redman, one of our licensed battlefield guides, and I used to dress up in uniform, and we were over by, where the Rupp House is. You know, there's a little, just south of us, there's this little open field. And Chris and I, we went to the same church. We would put on a Civil War sing-along. And we'd have sheet music for people, and they would sing with us as we would sing Civil War songs. And Chris and I would tell stories to people, and we would talk about what his soldier's life was like. I was dressed in blue, he was dressed in gray. And then we would just sing these songs and then tell stories and so forth. And eventually we'd end up inviting him to our church, because one thing we had in common was this common faith. Anyway, so that's not the point of this. The point of this is, we made the mistake one time of doing it.
Oh, no.
I think it was Memorial Day Saturday night. No, it was Bike Week.
Yeah.
It was Bike Week. And for those of you who don't know, Bike Week is motorcycles, not silent bicycles. Right. We were drowned out. And we learned never to try to do anything like that. I hope we don't get drowned out on this Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day to you all. It is Monday as we sit here right now.
Yeah, no, we're not going to get drowned out. These microphones are designed to reject a lot of that noise.
But we have our expert on all things town right near where he lives, right?
That
why don't you...
Well, you know who he is. Go ahead.
His name is Tim Smith.
Hello.
I think
Hey, Tim. We're here because of you. Thank you very much. You arranged it so that we could record here, and it's very nice. If you ever get a chance to come down to the Farnsworth House, do that, because it's the great atmosphere, great food, and maybe you'll see Tim walking around once in a while, and then you say hi to him. Tim, today we're talking, like I said, about what it was like to be in the town. A lot of times, people always want to talk about the battle. But there are people that are interested in the civilians. Also, sorry, Eric, the producer, is here with us as well.
Hello.
There are people that want to talk about the civilians. And you love the town and the civilian stories and all that stuff, so I thought, who better to have on for this one than you? So why don't we get started with June 26th, when Gordon's brigade comes through. First of all, I guess maybe... Now let's back up to the invasion in general. When word starts to spread that the Confederates are coming, what's the attitude that the civilians have?
Well, if you like sort of an overview of the events that occurred to the civilians, during the time of the battle, obviously Gettysburg is about 10 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line. And during the first 2 years of the war, there was sort of a constant fear and threat that the Southern Army might invade Pennsylvania, and their town might be the scene of a conflict. But that didn't happen during the first 2 years of the war. But there were constantly people riding into town saying, we have word the rebels are coming, or the telegraph would say that there's a raid on the B&O Railroad, or it looks like the Southerners are coming this way. And anytime there was an actual threat of raid, the townspeople got their goods and supplies together, maybe hid them in a barn, maybe they sent their horses away. It was difficult to live in the constant fear that the area might be invaded, and that was in their minds the whole time. Oh, I should mention, in October of 1862, Jeb Stuart, did raid into Pennsylvania with about 1,800 men. And he rode over the Potomac River, through Maryland, into Pennsylvania, came through Mercersburg, Chambersburg. He actually rode east, came over the South Mountain Range, and came about 5 miles from the town before his column turned south, and then rode down through Fairfield and Emmitsburg and back down through Maryland. So the Southern Army did, in fact, come close to invading our town in 1862. But it wasn't until 1863 that Lee's army actually invaded Pennsylvania and the first uniformed Confederates entered the town.
So the idea of Confederates coming here is not anything new to them, but they, I guess, kind of... There's like a boy who cried wolf type of an attitude after a while.
Definitely that plays into it a little bit. I mean, you can only imagine living in the area and, every few weeks there's a rumor that the Southern Army is going to invade or the Southern Army might be coming in. And I think people got used to the rumor and used to the rumor being proved wrong, that when the actual invasion occurred, a lot of people still didn't really believe there was going to be an actual invasion or Confederate troops actually would appear in the town. And when they did, it was startling to some people, and some people were not ready for it. Although I think when the Southern Army captured Chambersburg, and they were there for a few days before they moved east, people got the message that, hey, this is real. Enough people came in. And so most people, merchants especially, put their goods and supplies on a train, sent them east. The bank sent all their money away. So the two banks in Gettysburg, there was no money. They'd taken care of that. And a lot of the farmers had taken their horses and their cows and provisions and sent them away. Now, a lot of times in books on the battle, the sending away of the horses is looked upon as an act of cowardice. And I think people allude to it as, well, the male citizens ran away. But they're protecting their livelihood and their cattle and their, horses. And also, the governor, Governor Curtin, had issued a proclamation that the people in south central Pennsylvania should move their horses out of the area. Everyone knows that the Southern Army need to gather horses and supplies to equip and pull the cannons of their army, especially these nice big Pennsylvania draft horses, can pull some cannons. And so, and also I always like to point out with the horses, think about it. How much does a soldier make a month, Bob?
$13 a month.
Yeah. Horses cost like $300 or $400. So think about the worth of a horse as opposed to the worth of an individual soldier at that time.
Huh. So, the idea then, too, with the men taking everything away, was the thinking then that, gentlemen aren't going to make war on women, so the women are safe because, why wouldn't they be afraid?
Yeah. I think looking back on it, sometimes people who are critical of the townspeople, I always notice that, I guess I'm more conscious of it because I talk about the civilians a lot, that there's a lot of dispersions cast on the civilians.
Right.
People, I guess generally people are of the mind of, why don't all the men who live in the town get a gun, form a mob, and go out and fight the Confederate Army?
Yeah.
That's going to work.
And I'm sure that's what the people who are saying that are going to do if they're ever confronted with that situation.
And then, they chastise them for running away. And the phrase I see used sometimes is, the male citizens of the town mostly ran away and left their wives and children to the mercies of the enemy. But I think, everyone who lived in this area understands that in the American Civil War, the armies are not going to harm or, kill, women and children. It's just not done.
In 1863.
No, it's just not done. And, so I don't think that anybody believes that if you take your cattle away and then the Southern Army capture your town, which, of course, they're not expecting that actually to happen when they do, that the enemy is going to harm your family. I don't think they're worried about that.
We also know that the battle is coming here. This is where the battle's going
That's
to be.
right.
So we have hindsight. So
That's
we
right.
know how could you leave your women there, but they didn't know that.
That's right.
It's a precautionary
Yeah.
thing.
Now, Bob, you ever think about this? This often comes to mind. In the story of Wesley Culp, Jenny Wade, and Jack Skelly. So Wesley Culp, a local boy from Gettysburg who fights against a local Gettysburg unit at Winchester after the battle, one of the guys in the local unit here is wounded at Winchester, and he asks Wesley to deliver a message to him if he ever finds himself back in Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 weeks later, that unit finds itself in Gettysburg. Why would he suspect that Wesley Culp's unit would be in Gettysburg?
Mm.
You know, why do people we know that unit's going to be in Gettysburg 2 weeks later, but there's no way that they knew that.
No. But maybe he was talking about if you survive the war and never go
That's
back
what
home.
I say, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But
that makes
people
more sense.
they don't even question that. They're like, oh, yeah, so 2 weeks later he's going to be in Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Like he knows.
Right. Yeah.
I always wonder that. And that is so much hindsight. You know, we can never understand what it was like to be in the moment because we know what happens. We know the ending before we know the beginning. And historians should try to understand what it was like to be in that moment and not knowing what's going to happen. Yeah. And it's difficult to do.
I try, during this whole quarantine thing, I try to extrapolate the feelings, whether it's the fear or the uncertainty and all that stuff, and just remember what that feels like so that when I read about these situations, even though it's not apples to apples, the feelings, uncertainty and dread and fear are basically the same feeling regardless of what it is that you're fearing,
Maybe also historians are cursed at always looking at a current situation and thinking about how we're going to perceive it years from now. Mm-hmm. I do that all the time, and to the annoyance of my family.
So the Gordon's brigade is going to come through. He'll be preceded by White's cavalry, or White's Comanches, right, on June 26th. When White's men come through, I forget who it is. It's one of the young boys. He later describes it as more of an entertaining thing, like a Wild West show. I forget who it was.
Well, we have Charles McCurdy and Gates Fonestock that both describe it in that fashion.
It was McCurdy. That's what I'm thinking of. So what are they doing? Are they coming through just kind of whooping and hollering and shooting their pistols in the air and just,
Well, on from June 15th to June 25th, the Southern Army captured Chambersburg on June 15th and then slowly Confederate soldiers marched into the Cumberland Valley and they built their strength. I think when you look back at it, the Pennsylvania militia and the authorities of Pennsylvania, the governor, Darius Couch, or is it Darius Cooch, of the Department of the Susquehanna, they believed that they were containing the invasion to the Cumberland Valley, when in fact the Southerners were not trying to break out of the Cumberland Valley. Okay. And then on June 26th, the Southern Army make their move. They built their strength, and Juba Early's division marches from Franklin County, Pennsylvania. They were camped near Caledonia Furnace, Greenwood, and marches across Adams and York County with their objective of the Susquehanna River. And then other forces under Rhodes, of Ewell's, Robert Rhodes' division, moves north, and they'll end up capturing Carlisle and threatening Harrisburg. And so this is really the breakout move where the Southern Army just marches across south central Pennsylvania, basically unopposed, because Pennsylvania militiamen with no experience are not going to be much of an obstacle for them. And on June 26th, the Confederate Army captured the town of Gettysburg. And for the first time, uniformed Confederate soldiers of the enemy army enter the town. And it is kind of interesting. One of the things that happens is at the advance of Juba Early's division is a battalion, the 35th Battalion of Virginia Cavalry, commanded by Colonel Elijah White. And they're only about 175 men in the lead. And they decide, and it's almost as if they stop outside of town and they get together and they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so they ride into town brandishing their weapons and fire in the air, and they hoop and they howl and they ride around the square of Gettysburg, and they try to throw some fear into the local citizens. And many people are scared, and many people are frightened by the advance of the Confederate Army. But we have a bunch of accounts written much later by people who are looking back on it, and they were kids at the time, and they describe how they're not really that impressed by the Wild West show, or the little circus atmosphere as they perceive it. And I imagine these little kids standing in a square like, yeah, shoot that sign over there. Cool.
Hello, Getty's nerds. It's Matt, and I hope you enjoyed that preview of our premium content that can now be found over at patreon.com. I just want to let you know that Addressing Gettysburg will always have free content for you to listen to in the forms of our narrative episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville and the upcoming episode entitled Invasion, June 1863, appendix episodes, and our wildly popular Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes. But episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville take months to produce, as things are now. I hear from people almost every day asking how long until the next episode is finished. And the answer is, when I have the time, I can do it. Your support at Patreon can cut down the time it takes to produce an episode by months. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe the Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes are what you like, but they leave you wanting to learn more. Well, fear not. More is what Patreon is all about. Patrons receive access to new premium episodes each week. These episodes are straight interviews or discussions with licensed battlefield guides, rangers, local historians, academics, authors, public historians, people from the Gettysburg community who do impressive things, and frankly, just about anyone who can talk on a subject related to Gettysburg. I want to make sure that the interest you already have in Gettysburg is enriched with our premium content. Your support means the world to me, because that means it will be easier to produce content that will bring Gettysburg to more people and, hopefully, more people to Gettysburg. And the podcast episodes are just the beginning. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg and become a patron. I thank you in advance.